All right. Hi all of you. How are you all? All good. I hope you had a very good week. So, hi Sejal, hi Devyanshi, hi Prajal.
Hi
Hello,
everyone. Hi Arya.
good evening.
Good evening. Can you all switch on your cameras, please? Yeah. Thanks, Prajal. All right. So today we are having a policy discussion, and we have invited Mr. Jerry Kishore, who is currently working with UNI. That's a NGO that focuses on the education of children. So considering we have a policy discussion today, why not invite the right person who is working in the right field? So yeah, he has got a very diverse educational background. He completed his civil engineering from NIT Trichy, and post that he went on to marketing field, and now he's working with an NGO. So yeah, we at Sarkari School, I think I've told you, Jerry, already that we are an organization that is aspiring to be a think tank, and we are a group of policy enthusiasts, and our team is policy advocacy and research. So we're working on bringing out policy briefs, and we believe having such policy discussions is imperative for us to come up with good policy briefs, and we can add value to whatever we are doing. So welcome, Jerry, and over to you.
Thank you, Arya. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, definitely have a diverse background. It definitely brings a question to mind. What is a civil engineer doing in a policy discussion? But after all, it's a discussion about education, so why not be here? And good evening, guys. Can I just hear a good evening from all of you?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
You
Good
can
evening,
just call
sir.
me can call me by my name. Good evening. So Ari wanted me to join this meeting. She wanted me to talk about right to education. Assuming that's the topic of discussion for you guys today. How many of you know about right to education before we begin? You can raise up your hands. You can say yes and unmute yourself.
I guess
You can
all
raise
of
your
us
hands
know
if
what at least
you
have heard.
all heard of it. You at least heard of it, right? How long do you think it took the government of India to bring about right to education as an act, as something that is enforceable by law? You don't have to Google it. You can just guess it. It's just a random guess number.
Sir, I guess 8 years. It was first initiated in 2002 and then it came into force in 2010.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? Divyanshi, do you want to take a wild guess?
Yes, I also know that it came in 2002, but
Right.
yeah, I guess in
Okay.
2009 it started.
Okay. You're right. There was an amendment which came in 2002, but I was referring to how long it took India from our independence. It took us somewhere around 60 plus years from our independence to bring about an act like the Right to Education Act. And right to education in India currently is a fundamental right under Article 21A. And just like all of you to know, this is again a question. What is that one document in India that is that's the document of all documents, a document that gives you all rights, that takes away your rights at some times, a document that tells you
Our constitution.
exactly, and the wonderful document that is our constitution, right? So it guarantees us under Article 21A right to education for children in the age group of 6 to 14. Let me keep my introduction short because I know you all have a discussion after this. So the right to education is an act that came up in the year 2010, while an amendment made it a fundamental right in the year 2002, as many of you rightly pointed out, it became an act only in the year 2010. It guarantees compulsory and free education for children in the age group of 6 to 14. There is an importance for us to understand the meaning of the word free and compulsory. It is free because in all government-run institutions, all children in the age group of 6 to 14 must be admitted and must be administered free of cost. And it is called compulsory because it is the duty not of the parents, it is the duty not of the child, but rather it is the duty of the state, both the union, the center, and the local authorities to enroll the children in these institutions. And there are some really good aspects to the RTE. Let's get to the facts that we want to work on better, but let's talk about what's working right for them. One of the things that works right is we have a 25% reservation for children in the age group of 6 to 14 in private, unaided, aided schools as well, provided they are within a particular distance from the schools. I will let you figure out the numbers. I don't want to get into numbers. I don't want to get into statistics. I'm sure y'all will be able to do that yourself. It allows for these children, and it allows for social integration, because the children who are using RTE and trying to get that education for themselves are children from low income backgrounds, children from socially and marginally oppressed groups. And when you have 25% reservation for them in these private unaided schools, it helps in increase social integration. And another important thing about RTE is it has mandated that there must be a pupil to teacher ratio. There is a ratio of 1:30 that must be maintained. We have infrastructure norms which are in place, by which there must be a minimum standard. I'm talking about playgrounds at school, water drinking facilities, classrooms need to be of a particular size. There must be resources for the children to use. We're talking about libraries here. And most importantly, what is very essential with RTE and what will happen is it will help us. How many of you have heard of the word demographic dividend? I just want to know before I proceed further. Anybody over here who's heard of demographic dividend? Project, if you can, if nobody else volunteers.
Demographic dividend, yeah. I have heard about the term.
Right.
In one of the papers which we have learned, that is in developmental economics, we have heard about that demographic
Right.
dividend. It's like sort of like transition of as we have learned that there are 3 stages of the population, like the first stage, the second stage, and the third. So the transformation, and we say that our country is in the second stage of the population now, that is with high birth rate and lower death rate. And I know this much.
Yeah.
This.
Thank you, Prajal. Thank you. I think Prajal put it rightly. Demographic dividend basically, in a single line, would mean the working age population in our country right now is higher than the population that is dependent. So with a scheme like Right to Education, what would happen is you would have an increasing number of children who are educated. And when you combine that with demographic dividend, India will be able to attain its truest potential. India will be able to attain its highest potential. And as I was saying, another and multiple advantages with RTE is that we all at our schools, I'm sure, we've had experiences where we had to be punished, where we had to be shouted at by our teachers, where probably there were a lot of screening procedures for us to join. Maybe we don't remember, but RTE ensures that there must be no mental and physical punishment. There are no screening procedures when you enter as a child under RTE. And there is another important thing that happened very recently. The government removed a policy called the no detention policy. Normally, a detention policy is when you're retained, but the government came out and said, no, yes, the child can be retained provided they fail their exam in the 5th standard and in the 8th standard, even after being given an opportunity. And I want you, just among yourself, to tell me, now that I've talked about whatever is going right with RTE, please bring out your points and tell me what could probably go better, or what do you think are issues that are still plaguing a system like RTE? Take it away. You all have the floor.
So can I try?
Please go ahead.
So it's one thing which I think is that as you are telling that about the problem, and I guess bringing all the children belonging to that age group to school, I guess that's one of the challenge which RT is facing, Because as we know that our country is just booming with the population, like there is population explosion, and one more thing is very much prevalent in our country, which is child labor. And that is mainly prevalent in that age group between 6 to 14. And a majority of like the population belonging to that age group, they are like working in the unorganized sectors or those like self-employed sectors, and they are not being admitted to schools, and like they are just leading their life all by like that only. So I guess this is one of the like most important challenges of RT, that to bring all those like children to school of that age. I think
Right.
like personally, this is my view.
Right. Thank you.
I think like actually children are not majorly sent to school because they think it's an additional unpaid family labor. So sending children to school, which means less labor in the agricultural field. So that's, I think, one of the major impediments for like when policymakers try to make sure like when children go to school, I think this acts as a major hindrance. Also, like I have a question for you. So there is significant difference between these states in terms of the enrollment. What the percentage of what Karnataka has and what UP has, there is significant difference in the enrollment. Why do you think? What is the reason behind that?
Is that a question directed at me or is it to the crowd?
It's directed towards you, or anybody can answer for that matter.
I'll let the crowd take it and I can take it after that.
I think it's better you take up and then the crowd take.
Thank you. So one very important thing to remember is while we have a lot of acts in place, and I think just to give you an example, even in our fundamental rights, articles are there, 23 and 24, Article 23 and 24, which ensure that there should be no child labor, especially in hazardous industries. And also they prevent, there's a law that prevents trafficking as well. While those laws exist, it still happens, which is why, as Prajan mentioned, an act like the right to education isn't, we're not able to implement it to its fullest potential. The same way, when you talk about issues like enrollment, the reason an issue like enrollment exists in a lot of northern states compared to southern and southwestern states is because of lack of social integration, issues surrounding caste, low economic backgrounds, and there is no one size fits all approach for us to solve this. There is a need to decentralize solutions. There is a need to identify problems at the grassroots level. By grassroots, I'm saying probably the best person to solve this problem would be somebody from the block development officer. Somebody will have to step in, explain what the problem is, see how they can address it, because you can't sit right at the top and tell, hey, this problem exists, how are we going to solve it? You need to get down there, and the solution needs to be very personalized and decentralized. So a solution that might work in UP may not work in Karnataka. But a good food for thought, and forgive the pun for the example that comes up next, is a state like Tamil Nadu have schemes called midday meal schemes, wherein children are incentivized to come to schools by providing them with lunch. And there are multiple additions and nutritional aspects to it as well. But incentivizing children and parents to send them to school is a very good option to go forward. I hope that answers.
Absolutely. Great. And you also focus on practical policy making and how we should, like, it's very easy for people in the glass house to sit and tell, okay, this is what has to be done. But practically, grassroots level, how policy making functions is very different. Definitely. Like, what is your opinion, guys? Like, what are the other various issues that RT is facing?
I think Divyanshi is raising her hand. You can unmute yourself and speak at any time, guys.
So as you all mentioned, the issue of enrollment, I also believe that if the issue of enrollment solved, the next thing they should focus is why only 6 to 14 and not 3 to 18 years of compulsory education. I think stopping at 14 means leaving the task half away, because next 4 years of adolescence are also equally critically important with children's maturity. So I believe it should be 3 to 18. And secondly, the Right to Education Act has no provision on education of people with disability.
ये था basic idea.
Sorry. Should I continue? So there is not any provision for the children with disabilities, that is children with special needs. So despite the promise of universal access, children with special needs form the largest out of school group in India. And if we look at the stats, around 45% of Indians with special needs are illiterate. So I believe we should focus on that.
What do you think, Jerry? I think her points. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think Sejal has raised her hand. Maybe I'll go.
Oh, sure.
So I want to talk about one more limitation of the act. Can I go ahead?
Definitely go ahead.
Okay, so I think one of the limitation is the incidence of corporal punishments. We can it's clearly evident that these incidents happen very often in schools and like the corporal punishments, and this may be because of the students are unaware of their rights, that they cannot be beaten up by the teachers like this, and to stop these incidents. So, apart from that, the corporal punishments also causes high levels of absenteeism in schools. So I think that is one of the limitation. Apart from that is also the lack of infrastructure. So lack of infrastructure in the sense that also in most of the schools, like ramps for physically disadvantaged students have not yet been made, and also the student pupil ratio is not adequate, as it have been mentioned. It have been focused in the Right to Education Act. So I think these two limitations are there. So we can work upon that.
And adding just one more point, which is very common, that there are so many untrained teachers, and according to one report of HRD ministry, around 5,08,000 teachers were less according to the teacher student ratio, and sometimes your teachers do not teach properly, and there is one also demerit, that sometimes they do not even receive their salary. I think this is a major issue. This takes this they do not feel like teaching to the students, then they lose their motivation. This is, I think, is a very important point.
I think that is because of the quality, like the quality of education standards are not being maintained by the schools. That may be because of the untrained teachers, like maybe lack of training of teachers have caused this. Like the quality standards are not being maintained by the schools, and the more focus is placed on the quantity of education, like rather than quality of education. The focus is not just placed on completing the syllabus within the specified period of time, and so I think.
All right. I definitely think all of those were very valid and meritorious points in terms of what could be improved upon. I definitely don't have solutions for all of them, but I can just point you in the right direction and tell you what exists, what does not exist, and you as future policymakers, I'm sure, will come up with laws that help us out. So one, right to education for persons with disabilities does exist. It is mandated that the schools must have ramps for children with disabilities. Well, of course, it doesn't being implemented. It exists on paper as well.
exists on paper.
It exists on paper. And Samagraha Shiksha, under Samagraha Shiksha, you're supposed to have initiatives for helping children with disabilities. Children with disabilities are supposed to have compulsory free education till they attain 18 years of age. This just to address the problem of what is being done, what exists. One, and I think Nikita or Sejal, one of you also mentioned that the teacher to student ratio isn't maintained. Now, here is where, while we may not be able to do a lot about persons with disabilities, or we may not be able to take steps from our sides, except what's on paper, let us know that when you talk about the teachers to student ratio not being adhered to, or in case of infrastructure facility not being available at schools, we must look at ground reality. There is a need to understand that instead of closing down a school because they do not pass the minimum criteria in terms of what must they have in under RTE, because if it is the only school in that locality, you must continue. And as you say, if a teacher is being paid less, there must be steps that we need to take to ensure they're paid. But to say that because that exists, we won't continue our RTE program or we won't continue in these schools is not the solution. Because not being paid for your work is something that happens all across India, across different schemes. Even under MGNREGA, the skilled and unskilled labor are not paid, or rather the payment comes late. But these are all on-ground issues that we face. But yeah, I think those are my observations from whatever you said. If any of you think there are more problems, I think you can bring it up right now for discussion.
I think, like just to add on, one of the major, I think all of us would have read it in paper in one form or the other. So we have always seen, okay, under 25% quota, children from the underprivileged background has to be given admission. But it is actually creating a lot of discriminatory environment, especially in the private schools, because either the administration themselves do not want to give admission because of the monetary loss that they have to face. Otherwise, it is the kind of environment that is being created wherein the child who is being given admission into the RTE is discriminated upon. So that is something we need to work on, especially the behavioral change that we need to focus upon. So I think that's also one of the major issues that's being faced by children, especially under RTE.
I would like to add on that point, but before that, I would like to say that I'm from NIT Trichy, and it's very encouraging to see somebody from NIT Trichy in the policy discussion area. So regarding this, this can be solved by using a mechanism to measure the learning outcomes of children who are, enrolled due to RT. And so, like you said, these students are given separate sections and they are not usually taught. They give the reasoning that the academic levels of these students are different, but then the way the people cannot, but they're usually neglected. So what can be done is there can be a way to measure the learning outcomes of these children, so as to see how we can improve and how different schools can be given incentives to improve.
Absolutely. Definitely. That's one of the possible solutions that we can come up with. Other than these, what do you guys think? Like, what are the various solutions that we can come up with to address these issues that we are currently facing? Not just RT in terms of better education, generally, what are the various suggestions that because as policymakers, providing solutions is also equally important. So what are your suggestions?
I have got a suggestion regarding to the RTE. It's like we have heard stories of teachers discriminating students based on their caste, religion, or other grounds. And that, I believe, that is the reason why students do not attend schools in rural areas at least. So if we were to educate the teachers on how violating a fundamental right can affect them, maybe they might change their behavior, and maybe that can help more students come to schools.
Yes. Jerry, what do you think?
I think we're all addressing the same problem without probably saying it outright in the form that it needs to be said outright. one of the major issues that India as a country faces is caste discrimination, and any and all schemes that we come up with has that as a burden, has that as an issue along with it. I think that's what Anne would be referring to as well, and I think that's what you were referring to as well, Arya, at different points when you talked about social integration in unaided and private schools. Um, so the way forward, or rather solutions, as you're asking for them, one I would suggest is there is a need for education, not in terms of conventional education that children receive at schools, but there is a need for more education for children through our multiple programs that we have, such as ECCE, early childhood care, that the Ministry of Women and Child Development does take care of. There is a need to talk to them. There is a need to have these interactions, not just with children, with parents, make them understand about the realities of Indian society, make them understand about how everybody is an equal, how there is a need for equitable solutions, which is why we have a 25% reservation in unaided, aided private schools, and that there is nothing to be looked down upon for students who come from these backgrounds getting these seats. That is one. And I forget, Anne, you mentioned the point. Could you come again with the point? Could you come again with your point? I wanted to address that, but I forgot what it was. I missed it.
I think you mentioned like how teachers are discriminating students, and if they were made more aware of what happens when you violate a fundamental right, maybe they can change.
Right. Exactly the same, right? Again, a teacher itself discriminating upon a student. This again is an issue that is prevalent all across our country. And the need for that is again to enforce laws, to make sure that we are aware of our rights. Just want to ask to the crowd out here, how many of you know what are our rights without Googling them? How many of you know what our fundamental rights are? How many rights that we have? How many of us know what the preamble to the Constitution is and what the preamble to the Constitution guarantees us? I'm sure you'll get the answers if you Google them, but without Googling them, and you don't need to tell the answers here, how many of us really do know them? You can just raise your hands up. You don't have to if you're not comfortable. I'm glad that Gauravi knows it. Sejal as well. Divyansha, I'm glad that a lot of you are aware of your rights. It is wonderful to see, but there is a need to ensure that this is a part of every child, every man, woman, routine to know what we can and can't do. And only then, only in such a society, can we exist, and all of our schemes, right, whether it's RTE or whether it's any other act, for it to flourish, you must know what you can do and what you can't, what the law allows you to do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Knowing your right is something that is very important. But however, the sad reality is most of us do not know what our rights are, despite us getting education. Most of us are in colleges. But despite that, I don't think we know all our rights, and nothing, we are not that aware of it. Definitely agree with you, Jerry. So I think, is there any other issue, solution that you guys want to discuss upon?
Can I go ahead? I think more focus should be placed on the training program for teachers. And that can be done in the way like teachers have unique skill sets. They have, they have unique set of skills. So they centered like it should the training should not be like same for all. It should be the need-based training program. There should be the need-based training program according to their skill set, unique skill set. There should be different sections for the training. And I think apart from that, teachers, the teaching sector can be made more attractive through appraisals and through recognition of the teachers, like times when they maybe school can award the teachers who are teaching who I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I think Sejal is referring to giving the training aspects to teachers, especially. I think that's what she is referring to, right? Okay. So all right. Other than this, I think we've covered a lot of points from very different perspective altogether, like be it social, be it economic. We've covered like from very different perspectives, and I think Jerry, it's all thanks to you because you have given us a very good idea of what RT, what are various other aspects to it, what we need to look for as policymakers. It's easy for us to sit and judge a particular policy, but what are the various practical things that is involved? Thank you so much for that. I think we can conclude this meeting. Anybody else wants to say anything, add any points? Otherwise, we can conclude the meeting. Do you all want to add any point? I think Gauravi wants to
Yeah, I
go
have
ahead.
one point to make. So,
Yeah.
like we know about these non-profit organizations. Like, if you guys have heard about Project Nalanda, um, okay, so basically there are different, okay, just like that was just an example, but yeah, there are different non-profit organizations and different projects all around the country where people who, people in the organizations work towards the rightful implementation of these acts. Like, they work at the grassroots level because now there are several schemes being implemented for like under RDE, but there are certain factors, like we talked about the socioeconomic aspects. Like, for example, in COVID, now the sorry, everyone's frozen. Am I audible?
We lost you for a second.
Okay, yeah, so I'll repeat my last point again. Let me know if I'm not audible, please. Yeah, so during the pandemic, it happened where already people were losing employment, they were losing jobs, and families who rely on daily wages, who relied on jobs which they lost during the pandemic, they could not afford to feed their children and send them to schools. And while midday meal scheme is being implemented, I think the implementation is not strong enough and it's not efficient enough in the schools, where even we hear about incidences where really poor quality food is being provided to the children, which instead of benefiting them, in turn has made them sick at instances. So I think the what I'm trying to say by this is the like the non-profit organizations which work at the grassroots level into ensuring that these children are being fed so that they can go and get the education that is being provided to them freely. So these organizations need to be empowered, and government needs to do like implement schemes and implement programs which would empower these organizations so that they are able to help at the grassroots level to the population for whom the schemes are being provided. Help them available.
Thank you, Garvi. That's definitely a very valuable point. But just maybe a bone of contention that I personally I would like to add. Even with the whole 25% reservation that the government gives for children at unaided schools, that's the same argument I would make. That is the bone of contention is when we want a private unaided school to help the children, or when we want an NGO to step in and help educate these children or help them be aware of their rights, it's a good thing. It's definitely something that we can do, but we're telling that the state isn't efficient enough to do it, and the state is giving away its constitutional duty to do all of these things away. If I've understood you right, you're saying that NGOs must also work together, and you're right, they must. But what we're essentially facing today is these NGOs, let's say Pratham, let's say Akshapatra, XYZ, whatever we have, they are doing the role that the government must do. They are essentially doing where the government isn't doing enough. And the government is taking this as an opportunity to take steps back because it knows that there's somebody else doing it. So that is my bone of contention. And that's up for discussion. But that's how I would look at this.
Yeah, I do agree with the points that you've made, but just food for thought. Why can't these non-profit organizations be agencies of the government to help them, execute these schemes efficiently, which the government has implemented?
Adding on, I think, Jerry, you can tell us where are the various areas, like considering you're working in an NGO, you can tell us what are the various areas where actually you're working, where the government has failed or have not done their job.
I would prefer to stay away from a word like failed, but I think I'd probably like to talk about where the government could have done more, or where there is a chance for, there's a scope for much improvement. You're right, Garavi, and I'll address your question as well. You're right when you say that they can be agencies of change. They can be agencies through which this happens. And I'm glad as long as that is the case. The issue arises when we stop from being agencies, we become replacements. The issue is there, right? It's a very simple and thin line. Being an agency of change is a good and applaudable thing, a laudable thing. But when you become not even a supplement, when you become a replacement for good education, you cannot say that we don't have a government school in XYZ village. And so here comes an NGO and they help the children out. While the NGO are doing a good job, it is a moral responsibility, in fact, the legal responsibility of the government of India, the state, to provide these. And that is where we're at right now. And in terms of where we're lacking and where we're getting an opportunity to work, I would say that one important field that we get to work at is the government has set systems up, but there's a drastic reduction in the quality of education, which is where quite a lot of NGOs step in. There is as we've all talked about, the teacher to student ratio is very high, which is where a lot of NGOs step in. Their volunteers step in and try and help the children out. And one of the other issues is, I think somebody mentioned corporal punishment as well. While it's banned, it still happens. When NGOs step in, it is with a more kinder, it's with a more gentle touch to education for these children. These are the areas that NGOs would step in. And again, when you're mostly from an NGO, one thing is a lot of these people come here with a voluntary commitment. They're here to do the work because they like it. Unlike in other setups where whether you're a block development officer, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an XYZ in the government setup, you're there not because you're necessarily interested at times. You're there because you're mandated to be there. So these are the areas that, from my understanding, an NGO would step in and help. But thank you for this opportunity. It's been a very meaningful and nice interaction for me. I'm glad I got this opportunity to learn a lot from you. And it's glad to know there is an NIT Trichy student here as well. I was a student from NIT Trichy, so it's glad to know. It's glad to know. Thank you guys from my side.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for joining in, because, like, as I said before, you have given a lot of information, a lot of things to consider, a lot of points, a very different perspective, especially the last NGO thing that you did. Absolutely, I completely agree with it. So thank you so much for joining in, Jerry. Thank you so much. I think you've added a lot of value to all of us. And I think we can have more policy discussions with you in the future. Thank you so much. Guys, can you guys stay back for a minute?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So how was the discussion? Like, how did it go?
Ma'am, it was very good. Literally, it was very informative, and I really liked that and learned so many new things. Like, literally, we don't we come across these terms, but actually we don't go into the details of these things until and unless we do extensive research on these topics. And literally, Sarkari School has given this opportunity to do research and talk about this in open with all these like those who are knowledgeable about these things, and we are getting an opportunity to talk to them. So yeah, it was really very informative, and thank you so much.
So, like, anybody else who wants to add?
Yeah, I really liked the discussion. I got to learn a lot of stuff, and it was very easy. It wasn't like a very, heavy and jargon-based discussion, but still got to learn so much in a very smooth manner. So yeah, I loved it.
So I guess we can have more such policy discussions in the future. I think we can call people and then we can have such discussions. I really think it is adding value to all of y'all. I really hope it's helpful. So yeah,
Absolutely.
and I thank you so much. And I have posted the assignment. I will give you feedback in a day or two because it's very worked up with a lot of other work with meetings and everything. So by tomorrow, day after tomorrow, I'll give you feedback for the previous assignment. So for the new assignment, I think the instructions are clear. If you guys have any doubt, feel free to call me up, ask, no issues. And as I said in the last meeting, any feedback, anything you need, do let me know. Okay.
Ma'am, can I
Yeah.
like speak with you privately for a minute?
I couldn't hear you. Could you please repeat?
Yeah, can I speak with you privately for a minute?
Sure. You want to stay back? You stay back.
Yeah,
Otherwise, if you want to give me a call.
yeah,
Okay, if
I
you want
can
to stay
stay
back.
back.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else who wants to talk something, or you can leave. No issues.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Good night.
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
The assignment you gave today, this is also group assignment.
That's what, like, I asked in the group, as long as you guys are comfortable doing it in groups, it's fine. But if any of you are facing any issue, like if your team member is not cooperating or you feel it's doing more harm than good, feel free to tell me. So I'll do an alternative for the same.
I'm
So
very
you can
comfortable
even,
with my teammate actually. So can we do it in a group?
yeah, definitely. See, it's all your choice, no issues. But like when you're doing it in group, I expect certain quality because like two people, two brains, two completely two different perspectives, two thoughts. Go ahead, no issues.
Thank you.
Sejal, do you want to ask something? Okay, I think she left. I think it's better we get on a call because this is being live streamed on YouTube. I just realized it.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah,
should I call
you
you?
call me right. Yeah, you can
Okay.
call me right.
Thank you.
Bye bye.